Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's December 21st, 2014. We're at the top of the second hour with my guest, Scott Bennett. We're having a wonderful pre-Christmas chat about all kinds of naughty Swiss elves and the corruption that was going on and the work that my guest, Scott, has done in organizing the data to compile for all of us, the people, the information that we need to be able to be educated on what is really going on, both within the United States and what is being facilitated with the United States tax dollar and usurped for its original purpose, and being basically driven to, defense contractors and the facilitation of fictitious wars and the financing and paying off of rogue CIA-trained operatives that create havoc all around the world under an illusion of the bad guys, only to, wreak havoc on the Earth and devastate this planet's surface, both in the hearts and minds of the people and through bombing and destruction of communities. So thank you so much for being here, Scott, and for your work and your pound of flesh and then some that you've paid.
Well, it's funny when you're talking about CIA. One side note I wanted to throw out, and it's in the materials I put up there. But when they sent me out of Pennsylvania in February, instead of flying me, which they should have done, they sent me on a bus to kind of torture me a little bit more. So here's a 4 or 5 day bus ride, in freezing cold weather in the middle of winter, just to try and hit me even harder. Again, all of this I treated like a military operation going through SEER school. So in a sense, it was sort of like a challenge to see how much I could endure. But
for the listener, can you explain what SEER school is?
SEER school is a military school they send you to for search, evasion, resistance, and escape, where they torture you, they waterboard you, they hunt you down, they pretend like you've been captured by as a prisoner of war. And you're being interrogated by enemy armies, and you have to endure all sorts of trauma and psychological resistance. And really, I thought at the time when they first stopped me at MacDill Air Force Base and held me at gunpoint and forcibly took me on base and put me in a cell and put my arms behind my back and all these horrific things, locked me in a car for 10 hours in the Florida sun. I thought, this is part of my SEER training. They're prepping me for an operation. They're prepping me for deployment. And because I was told you're going to be put through training. So I never questioned it. I thought this is all part of an operation. I didn't discover till much later it was all nonsense. But that's part of the reason that this whole prison experience has been like water off a duck's back. I've taken it, and I'm like, okay, is that all? Is that the best you've got? Is that all you can do to me? Well, let me tell you, now it's my turn to step into the arena and look at all the stuff I've found out. I've met the Swiss banker, and all you guys are going to hang. All of you guys are going to be drugged before some men of Congress who have some character, and you're going to be questioned before Senate and House Intelligence new committees that'll run Boehner out on a rail and some of these other clowns and say, who is going to be responsible for this? Dianne Feinstein. You've got reports from Bennett for the last 2 years, and you've covered it up. But not to digress. But when they sent me out from Pennsylvania to California,
it's called diesel therapy. Is that correct?
Diesel therapy. That's right. Absolute torture. And they sent me out to California, and they put me in a halfway house. And this halfway house is full of rapists, murderers, and people that come from high-level, penitentiary who've been in jail for 10, 15, 25, 30 years. Not for guys who come from camps. No one ever goes to a halfway house if you're from a camp, which is a white collar where doctors, lawyers, and stockbrokers go. Well, they sent me to a halfway house. Why? I don't know. Maybe they were going to try and bump me off or something. But they sent me to this halfway house, and I'm stuck there for a month. But one of the things I discovered was, and they never anticipated this, they are teaching a class in these halfway houses, the Department of Justice, mind you, teaching a class titled Deep Black, the history of the CIA operations and drug operations around the world, working with Mossad and assassinating journalists, military people. And you just saw a little bit of it. There was a movie that came out over the summertime about the journalist Webb. I can't remember the title, but that was a story about a journalist who uncovered the CIA drug operations. Well, the Department of Justice is teaching inmates who get out of jail and go to a halfway house. They're teaching them, lecturing to them, and I've got a copy of the syllabus, that the CIA have been running all this drug operation. You're in jail because the CIA, you ran afoul of the CIA system. The CIA is in charge of the U.S. drug trade. The CIA is in charge of the poppy fields in Afghanistan. The CIA has been working with Mossad in the sex slave trade industry in Israel that finances a lot of these operations. It blew my mind, and I got a copy of that, and I sent it to the court in Florida saying, I've already went through drug training, and because they have on your probation, you have to go through training classes, and I wrote and said, I've already been through this training. Here it is. And its title is CIA Drug Operations. So I've asked the court to recognize this class as a legitimate class.
So you're documenting it.
If it's legitimate, I'm documenting. I'm putting it all on the documentation. And I'm saying, if this class is true, you damn well better take my motion and send it right up to the Congress and demand that they investigate this class that's saying the CIA is killing military guys, running drugs. Or if it's not true, then you better pay me and every other inmate that you've brainwashed and psychologically damaged with lies, because you've told inmates that their government, their Central Intelligence Agency, has been running drug operations and killing soldiers. And that was one of the little perks that I discovered coming out here. And you're right, I've documented it and I've put it out there because you couldn't make this up. And Carrie Cassidy had said, well, why do you think they're doing that? And she had wisely said, because they're trying to recruit more drug operatives for the CIA systems.
And this is something, again, I would really love to stress to the international community that's listening. I've had the luxury of spending 2 years boots on the ground here in the United States with the people who are wide awake, hearts on fire, and willing to step up, everyday average Joes. And for the international community, I don't think they really understand what is going on an everyday level. Thank goodness for your training. The fact is, you did go through SEER school. I myself did not have that luxury. I've just gone through 2.5 years of federal prison and from the sidelines, but as invested as I possibly could, and I will tell you that I saw the faces and the hearts of the family members that are helpless to do anything for their loved ones on the inside. And if they do try, as I did, as Mark Emery's wife did, the inmates get diesel therapied, which is what you just explained, or they get put into solitary confinement, which is what happened to my husband when I sent a chain email to the head of Washington State Probation alerting people that there was a death threat put on my husband on the internet. And they put my husband in solitary confinement for 20 days. Terrible.
Eva, I can't stress how humbled and how honored I am to know that you have endured this. You are a paragon of virtue as a wife and a woman to have gone through this traumatic experience and supported your husband, because few women have the strength and the character to do what you did. So many women abandon their men, divorce, the family falls apart, the lives are ruined. But for you to have stood by and stood the storm is such a testament. And your husband is, I know he knows it, how lucky he is but you have grown, and really prison makes, I mean, the families go through more trouble and torment than the prisoner does, because you have to suffer, but you don't get the luxury of the camaraderie and the self development and the isolation and the self cleansing and the self reflection that comes with these monkish experiences. It's like you're in a monastery. But the wife and the children are the ones that really suffer. But you are exactly right. The Nazi Gestapo prison, Department of Justice, Federal Marshal Service, Bureau of Prisons, what they do to Americans in these prisons is absolutely unconscionable. I've seen men die who shouldn't be dead, who've died of heart attacks because of the stress they were put through in their 50s. I've seen men lose their legs because they've had a cavity that was ignored for a month and a half, and it had a connection to a nerve cancer issue. And I mean, my old bunkmate had to have his leg cut off because they ignored his medical condition. I've seen men given the wrong prescription medicine and their livers are eaten up and destroyed, and they're wheeled out and sent to hospice. And if they don't know how to type, or they don't have family, or they just don't know how to do things, they're dead men. And you're right, the wives or the families who step in and make a call to the warden and make it known that something's wrong, their husbands are sent to Timbuktu. They're sent thousands of miles away across the country. And they're absolutely tormented, so no one says or does anything. And it's absolutely a crime. And especially because in camps, for example, where you have doctors and lawyers and stockbrokers and people who aren't violent, they're not out robbing banks or doing, serious Al Capone drug things. They're in there for insider trading, or they're, in a lot of cases, they're not guilty of really anything. And the big psyop in the American society is like, well, everyone who says they go to prison is they say they're innocent. You know what? Most of them in a camp I know are innocent because they've been roped in and railroaded into a fabric false prosecution, and they're told by the prosecutor, you either take a plea deal for 1 or 5 years, exactly, or we're going to throw 25 years exactly at you.
And they're intimidated, and they're bullied.
And they're intimidated.
And
they cut a plea,
yeah,
and then they can never appeal. Now me, I never took a plea. I went to court.
Yeah, neither did my husband. Neither did my husband.
And that's good, because your husband can, till the day he dies, can always put back in the court system a motion to have himself completely exonerated. If you don't take a plea and you go to trial, you can fight till the rest of your life to have yourself vindicated, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fight until I die to have this entire case thrown out and have everybody pulled in and held to account for what they did to me. Because what they did to me, they could do to every American soldier. Every soldier who comes back from war and goes to visit his little daughter at kindergarten dressed as uniform, they can throw into a federal prison like they did to me. Every soldier who fills out a housing form or some sort of moving your household goods onto base, if you dot an I wrong, they can file a false statement charge against you and throw you into a federal prison. If they don't like your political allegiance, they don't like that you are a conservative or a liberal for that case, they can file federal charges against you in a civilian court. For that reason, my case can't be allowed to stand. It has to be, and it'll go back in front of the courts, and if it has to, it'll go in front of the appeals court, and if it has to, it'll go in front of the Supreme Court to say, Scott Bennett is an example of the American soldier, and you cannot prosecute him in a civilian court with these charges because it is a complete miscarriage of justice. It's a perversion of the statutes and laws that the American people have put on the books. You cannot be allowed to do it, and if you do get away with it, you are basically gutting the American military and threatening them. And basically you're setting up a dictatorship where the president can go into the military and cut out, through the Department of Justice, his executive branch. He can go into the military and gut anybody he doesn't want, and basically have the military serve his beck and call. That's not what Congress intended.
Well,
So
and I think it
that's
goes
why it's
back,
encouraging.
yeah, it goes back, and this is again, I thank you. Everything you just said was phenomenal. And this is what the international community needs to hear, is that from the outside, it looks like the American people don't care, that they're just shopping and going to, keep their status quo. And to some extent, that happens, to some extent. But I think what's really going on that is not seen is the terror and the fear that is, I mean, of course it's starting to hit the media now that with police brutality, but this has been going on since 9/11, since the loss, since the Patriot Act was put in place. Basically, it has been a closing society, and because of the shock and awe of 9/11 and the propaganda that was perpetrated, and the subconscious minds were wide open from the shock of those towers and the repetition of the images.
Yes.
The subconscious is wide open. So with the media just telling us it's the brown guys over there, those bad guys over there, those bad guys over there with the box cutters, it's like, oh, okay, it was the box cutters, and our subconsciouses just take that in because of the shock. And it's taken us this long to recover from that shock. And in the meantime, in the background, there's been this juggernaut of systematic destabilization of the whole structure of the country.
Yes.
And so people such as yourself could be put into positions of false, and that is the usurpation and subversion of the judicial system, which is part of that primer. So you are an exception to the rule, and it's men like you and others that stand, that have the fortitude to not take a plea and say absolutely not. And not only that, because that just in and of itself is a huge burden. It is. But then to recover and to be willing to keep going. When did you put your website together? Because your website is an amazing, and then these 3 books are amazing. Can you tell everybody about your website?
Yeah, the website just was put together when I got out of prison. I put it together in, about 2 months after I got out. I took every document that's up there was written in prison. Every document that's up there was sent to Congress and the military in prison. Every letter that was sent out to these congressmen and senators and media people were sent out in prison. And all of the documentation, the WikiLeaks cables and the Union Bank of Switzerland accounts, all came to me from Brad Bukenfeld. All of that material that he gave me, I in turn put into a report, an official military whistleblowing report, and sent up to my military chain of command and my political chain of command, saying very specifically in legal language, I am a United States military officer. I am unconstitutionally and illegally incarcerated. I am making known to you, the United States Senate, the United States House of Representatives, the Joint Chairman, Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey, Secretary of the Army, Ray Odierno, that United States military resources and personnel are being killed with money that is financing terrorism through Swiss banks. Here is the documentation. Debrief me. This material has come to me through unclassified sources, specifically the whistleblower himself, Brad Bukenfeld. I have more material. He has more material. Please debrief me so we can provide it. I didn't go right to the media and dump it all out. I went my chain of command because I wanted to protect soldiers' lives. I wanted to protect contractors. I was expecting them to come in like cavalry and say, Bennett, we never knew you were in prison. We can't believe this has happened to you. Who's to blame for this? What do you have? I thought they were going to come riding in on a white horse and say, we're sorry, this is a big misunderstanding, snafu, but now we're going to make it right. Let's look at all this material and move forward in a positive mission. Nothing. Not a single word was said. Not a single letter was sent to me. Not a single phone call. And I had family in California sending out public press releases and packages of information to media and political figures, and no one did anything. They completely buried their head. And the sickening thing is that some mothers and fathers' kids are dead because of the cowardice and the corruption of these political leaders like Dianne Feinstein, like Howard Buck McKeon. who's chief of staff, I've talked to on the phone, and they keep telling me, well, you have to contact your congressman or senator. We don't have anything to do with that. And I've said, you do have something to do with that. You are chairman of the Armed Services Committee. That is your role, is to take care of business that affects members of the armed services. I'm not coming to you as a constituent. I'm coming to you as a military officer. They've done nothing. And up until February of this year, 2014, from July 23rd, 2012, until this February 2014, I was an official military officer on the books in the United States Army. How they could ever have left me up there and still kept me in the Army is beyond me. But it's one of the many things that will be brought back into the court of law. The hope is, and the truth is, so many military guys don't know anything about this. Mm-hmm. So many military guys don't have a clue that the whole 9/11 shenanigan psyop was completely false. It was a complete false flag operation designed to run on a crazy crusade through the Middle East. Mm-hmm. But they're now discovering it. Yeah. They're now starting to digest and look at it. And, that's one thing that's beautiful about the American patriot, the American spirit. Americans are like a sleeping giant. Once you get them woken up, once they get a hold of something, once they smell blood in the water, once they learn they've been deceived and lied to, my God, there is not an enemy on the face of the planet that I would fear more than the American citizen. Because they're brash, they're bold, they're fearless, they know how to unify, they've got the Christian heritage that stretches back before 1776 until now, and they will take the government and shake it by the scruff of the neck and take the country back. And there's a lot of promise and there's a lot of hope. And I hope and pray that we begin to really move quickly in 2015 with this new Congress. And one thing to do immediately is stop the brakes on this out-of-control war machine that's gearing up to go against Ukraine and Russia and China. Mm-hmm. Because that is an absolute, waterfall we're in the danger of going over. So it's a little bit more of a... One thing I wanted to say, you had mentioned Brad Bukenfeld and done a little bit of research into Brad and his materials. Let me just say, Brad is a brilliant man. I love the guy. He's one of the smartest guys I've ever met. And he was so angry about what they did to him. He was so furious at Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. He was so furious at Tim Geithner, who was in charge of the New York Fed. He was furious at Kevin O'Connor and Kevin Downing and Lanny Brewer and Eric Holder, all of whom were tied with Covington and Burling, the law firm that represented UBS, and the railroading of him. He was furious at President Obama, who was a senator on Senator Levin's Permanent Subcommittee of Investigations at the time Bukenfeld gave his testimony. He was furious at Carl Levin. He was furious at John McCain, because all of those guys were given his material, and he gave it to them in the best interest of the people of the United States. He gave it to them to say, this is for my fellow American citizens. And I don't mean to sound Pollyanna-ish, but that really is in the heart of when we do things like this, is we're coming to say, this is to serve my country. This is to serve our people. And use this. Do something with this. That's why we voted you in office. That's why you're occupying a job in the Department of Justice and the Department of State. And instead they betrayed him. Mm-hmm. And in fact, there's a case to say they tried to kill him. Mm-hmm. A lot of the WikiLeaks cables that come out of the State Department, I said, Brad, I was at the State Department when these cables were getting written. I worked for Ambassador Del Daly at the State Department Counterterrorism Office. I know all about this stuff. And I never once heard about you or was told about you, and you never once heard about me. And that's where we came together.
I have a quote from the Global Post 2005 that he was interviewed, and he said, it says, when Bukenfeld went to his boss and demanded an explanation, the boss brushed him off, and Bukenfeld blew his stack. I I said, I'll effing go outside with you right now. I want some answers, and I want them now.
Yeah. Brad he's a big guy. I mean, he's 6'3" or 4, and he is just, he's tenacious. He went to military school in high school, so he's got a lot of military, character in him, and a lot of integrity, and he's fearless. And he grabbed this originally. And I mean, the story was phenomenal, and so many other guys that I'm happy to put you in touch with that you can talk to and confirm. Absolutely. They'll tell you everything that I'm telling you that Brad told them, and that know me too. The whole story, you couldn't make up. But Brad had told this phenomenally weird story on how everybody had tried to bury him, and they charged him with the very same material that he gave them in his Senate testimony, and they refused to let him use that to exonerate himself.
Sounds like Chelsea and Manning. We're going to go to break and be back the last half hour with my guest, Scott Bennett.